So welcome to the Fellowship of the Ring Pool. This is a weekly gathering, a safe house for people wanting to discuss matters music and sound and anything else you'd like to talk about. So subject of the day, stage nightmares. I'm going to start with something that didn't happen to me. It happened to a friend of mine who was an opera singer. There is a bucket in both sides of the stage, wings, particularly for opera singers, because they use a lot of their diaphragm and they have complicated, particularly with period stuff, costume changes. If they get caught short, it basically means that they run the risk of pissing themselves on stage when they sing and use their diaphragm. So there is a little bucket that is in the wings where you can crouch over that and relieve yourself. My friend had this very situation. She was going to go on and do a duet with something that was particularly physically demanding. So she took her tights down, her stage tights, which are those very thick kind of ice skaters tights, and crouched over this bucket and relieved herself. Quite a volume, apparently, of micturate came out. And as she put her tights on, she was surprised at how warm the tights were. She didn't realise that, she was in kind of period gowns and didn't realise her crotch was so hot. So she went on stage, and there was just this look of the person that she was singing with in the duet of sheer horror. The water drained out of this guy's face. And she realised the warmth actually derived from the fact that she hadn't pulled her tights down correctly and it had relieved the contents of her bladder into these very kind of watertight, opaque stage tights, and had walked on stage with basically a piss udder protruding from under her dress. But being a pair of tights and not basically a colostomy bag, slowly the tights started relieving themselves of her warm micturate onto the stage. The audience became transfixed by this steady stream of piss floating towards the orchestra pit and dropping on to, I think it was the viola player. So that was one of those nightmarish scenarios. I can see our friend in Guatemala. A lesson to be learned is make sure that your tights, pantyhose, are well clear of the bucket that you're pissing in before going on stage to sing a demanding duet. Alan, who's the producer of this podcast, is a saxophonist. Do you have any nightmares?
I was touring with a tribute act.
Yeah.
And it was tenor saxophone and baritone saxophone. And one of the numbers was baritone sax and it had the pickup, so it was just me and my own. And I forgot to change instrument. So I was playing tenor the number before, forgot to change to baritone. The MD counted the track off and I came in on the wrong instrument, and as soon as the band came in, I'm in the wrong key and it just sounded awful. We just stopped. The MD was really good and he made a joke about it.
Right.
And this was on the gig. This was the gig was going, but the singer was raging. You could tell. And I had to do that really embarrassing thing of changing instruments, and everybody knew it was my fault.
My recommendation, if you're doing a gig, is not to try doing something for the first time on stage. And for me, this doing something for the first time was using a double brace keyboard stand. I was in this school band and we got into the London School Band of the Year competition for Triac, which was a spot cream, an appropriate sponsor there. My main keyboard was a Fender Rhodes, but I also wanted to help the saxophone lineup that we had with some trumpets because we didn't have any brass. So basically the school rented me in a double brace and this synth. And because I'd never set one of these things up before, I put the Fender Rhodes on the top bracket because that felt better, and the horns that I was going to play with my left hand on the bottom bracket. Now, 2 weeks prior to the final, I'd got drunk in Hammersmith Broadway and I was running across this dual carriageway, and because I was drunk, had misjudged this car, how quickly it was coming towards me. It hit me and threw me into the air, and I remember flying through the air and thinking, don't put your hands out, don't put your hands out, take the impact with your body because you've got this final. So I think that there was part of me wanted to put my hands out, part of me didn't. So the net result is I put a finger out and literally the whole of my weight landed on my middle right finger, breaking it. I didn't get it braced because I said to the doctors that I needed to play this final. I had my middle finger not working, this double brace keyboard setup, and I walked on stage, and the first thing that I needed to do in this track that we were playing was hit this really big low note on the bottom of the Fender Rhodes and really shake the theatre. The sound check had gone well. I was only, 15, so it was really, really nerve-wracking. There were lots of girls that I wanted to date in the audience and this, that, and the other. So anyway, walked on stage, stood with my hand just resting on the new synth that I'd rented below, and hit this massive note on the Fender Rhodes, at which point the top brace collapsed with my Fender Rhodes onto my finger. For some reason, the Fender Rhodes didn't like this and ceased to work. I am literally screaming in agony because I've got a Fender Rhodes sitting on top of my broken finger, and the only working keyboard that I've got to use has had the preset changed by the Fender Rhodes to a harpsichord. Yeah. And we won. So it seems that Baroque will get you somewhere after all. Hey, Kent. So do you have any live nightmares to share?
I used to play guitar for my church, and everything was going fine. But I guess I must have been more lazy than I thought because it had been quite a while since I last changed my strings. We're playing our 60s folk style, song. You hear like this big snap. And so my B string is no longer with us. It is in the ether. It did not hit anybody, although I did see it fling around. So then I essentially change my game and have to play chords that don't rely on the B string in the middle of the song.
I remember hearing a story of Art Tatum, an amazing jazz pianist, doing a gig where the piano keys went down but didn't go back up again. And he had to do the entire gig with his mate, who was also a piano player, sitting under his legs, pushing the keys up that he was pressing down. The lengths we go to get our paycheck at the end of the night. The show must go on. Charles, do you have any horror stories?
I was not present, but the band members that I worked with in the circus band told me the story that they were playing a prior circus gig before I got on the show. The Tigers come out during the intermission, and there's this train of cages that goes out to the big cage where they open a gate and the Tigers walk through and get into the big cage. When the intermission came, one of the musicians decided to take a shortcut. Instead of walking way around wherever we walked, he walked between the tiger cages to get to wherever he wanted to go, not knowing that a female tiger, when it urinates straight out. So he walked between these cages just as a female tiger took a piss, and he was rained upon. The guy went to the concession stand or whatever, and he's got like part of his sleeve or his coat wet with tiger piss. When the break was over, he goes back and he sits down. And these guys are sitting there going, "What is that? Joe, what? You stink. What happened?" He said, "Oh, they made him leave."
We've got a gentleman from Waverley Instruments who said worst gig experience was playing guitar at an Americana festival and all the punters were dressed up as cowboys. We were a very mellow band and some guy at the front of the stage shoots a gun during our guitarist song. Couldn't hear my left ear for the rest of the night. Basically, the theme of tonight has been piss and transposing, and I'm going to take it to a darker, browner, more fecal place. I was touring with Peter Andre. Again, he was a big teen solo artist, really shifted some serious units, and actually had an international hit with a track called Mysterious Girl. and I was part of his live band, and we were playing arenas, and then we did a bunch of European dates. We had done this major sellout tour, ending up at Wembley Arena, which was a big moment for me to play Wembley Arena. And then we went and did a gig in Rotterdam, and the promoter had fucked up the promotion, had got all the dates wrong and had got all the promotion wrong. So we were in this arena designed for, I think, a capacity crowd of 8,000. And I'm not exaggerating. There were 600 people there. Now, Peter Andre is a really lovely bloke. There was a member of his entourage, which will, if you excuse my French, was an absolute cunt. And basically, at the end of this concert, had found the experience so humiliating for the band, even though he wasn't a member of the band, that he got the promoter up and held him up to the wall by his neck and threatened to kill him. Exactly a year later, we were booked to play a festival gig in Rotterdam, and we had done a show, I think, in Denmark it was like an afternoon show on a beach, and they'd put us on a private jet over to Rotterdam. I was always the last to leave the stage doing the prep because I basically would have a slightly more complicated thing to calibrate, to set up. What really surprised me was the person who booked us for this festival was the guy who'd been held up by his throat the year before. I got off stage, ran to the caravan and put my wet gig clothes on because they were still wet from the sweat from the gig that morning. And as I came out of the caravan, I looked around and I said, what is that band doing here? So Status Quo are really kind of a bunch of really old rockers. And, usually the lineups we were on, we'd be with the All Saints and Boyzone and this, that and the other. And I was like, what are Status Quo doing here? And I could see they were tuning up, so it looked like they were going on after us. We walked out on stage, and I realised that basically this promoter had booked us on a lineup for a middle-aged, massive Kings of Rock concert. And I looked at Peter, and he walks on in a fucking sailor's suit. At which point, all of these bearded Vikings are just go boo like that. I look over to the side of the stage, and this promoter's just standing there like this. This is his comeuppance. The amount of detritus that was being thrown at us, I'm talking a crowd of at least 50, 60,000 people all throwing shit at us. And all of this detritus is flying down, and a lot of it's hitting the guy who held the guy up by the neck, which is kind of ironic. So Peter Andre turns around to me about halfway through the song and goes, should we do Mysterious Girl? And it's like, I wanted to say to Peter, but couldn't really communicate with him because of the noise of the booze and the kind of bits of tree whistling past my ear. I wanted to say to Peter, no, Peter, that will literally be a kind of a risk to life, playing Mysterious Girl, because it was one of those songs that was really overplayed and everyone hated. Halfway through that song, the dancers left the stage because the head of the dance troupe said it's dangerous, where the amount of bottles of wine that was smashing on the stage were basically causing a danger to the dancers. So we started playing Mysterious Girl. There's Peter Andre in his sailor suit. The roars and the boos have got to this deafening kind of climax, and I see this thing just spinning through the air. Almost looks like a boomerang, and it hits Peter Andre across his face and his chest, and basically a bunch of people had clearly got together and done a bunch of communal shits in a bag and had lassoed it onto the stage, and it just exploded all over Peter Andre. And, it's that thing of watching someone having a cognitive dissonance and not clocking it. It's like the band knew as soon as that hit, it was you could smell it. It was like, oh, that's human shit that he's now covered with. And Peter's turned around and goes, what's all this? And it's like the band are going, that's human shit. At which point, Peter just goes, kill it, like this. Walks off stage. Thing is, I'm setting up the backing tracks, but the person controlling the backing tracks is right in the hut, in the middle of the thing. And because of the howls and the flying shit and the wine bottles and the bits of tree, doesn't clock that we're killing the gig and walking off. So off walks Peter Andre, covered in shit in his sailor suit, whilst his vocals continue. One of the things that I really enjoy now, as a composer, I guess as a more of a background person, is when stuff goes wrong, because you build up the chops to deal with adversity. And I think that there's something that I really am starting to relish in life, and that is dedication and devotion isn't refundable. And there's nothing anyone can do to replicate the experience that you have gained. There's nothing anyone can do to compete with that unless they put the same amount of dedication and devotion into it. And I think for anyone who is looking at the long game when it comes to their careers, the more time you put in is more an investment, much more than any of this crap, is the greatest investment that you can put into it, because it's not refundable. Experience is something so precious. So I'll leave you on that note. We're back every week. It's a small number of people who are joining us, and I really look forward to this every week. We hope to build it into something, certainly when maybe some more girls will join us. That would be nice to see, great diversity and stuff like that. But a date for your diary is the 19th, where we're going to have our end of year podcast. And it's not just going to be me. I'm going to be joined by someone really special, a really, really special friend who you will recognize from a different era in my life. So you have been duly teased. I'll let you know who that is in the run up to that podcast on the 19th. For any of you who can make it over to or up to Edinburgh, either for the walk or to meet us for a pint, I'll be drinking coffee at the Sheephead. That's going to be on the 21st. Details down below. Fill out the Eventbrite just so we know how many people to expect and how much money to put behind the bar. Thanks ever so much, as always, to everyone who's joined me on the Google Meet. I hope to see you next week. And just, remember, Tigers spray.